So I think we're ready. May I call on Monica Horton to open this meeting tonight.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to welcome everybody here tonight to what I hope will be an interesting debate about who should represent us in the European Union. There are people filming in the room. Just in case anyone would like to know, we have a French TV channel here. We're delighted to welcome them. And we also have our very own videographer, Quentin Clark, who will be producing our live stream for us. And this event is going to be streamed live onto the internet. If you want to review it afterwards, you can find it on the Berkshire for Europe YouTube channel. I'd like to welcome our panel tonight, and we're really delighted to have with us Catherine Bearder, who's the Liberal Democrat MEP for the South-East, John Howarth, who is the Labour MEP for the South-East, Elise Benjamin is the Green candidate for the MEP. Eleanor Fuller, who is the ChangeUK candidate. And Pacelli Ndikumana from the UK and EU party candidate. Our chair for tonight is Professor Andy Knapp. Andy is a Professor Emeritus of this university. He was Professor of French Politics and Contemporary History. I think that we should recall the proud tradition of this country of free speech. Free speech means that we can criticise the government without the risk of being thrown in jail or any other kind of sanction or police action against us. But free speech is not a completely unconstrained right. Free speech doesn't give you the right to abuse others, to smear their names, to attack them, or to incite violence. Whether or not you agree with what's being said by a speaker or an audience member, we would ask you to keep your remarks respectful.
Good evening. I hesitate to lift a quote from the late Enoch Powell, but he did say at the beginning of a rather well-known speech, "Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad." At the close of this decade, nature has served on the human race fairly clear notice that its treatment of the planet cannot go on if we wish the life of our species and many other species to continue. And what does the human race do in this decade? It starts obsessing about national identity. This is a problem. The name that the problem has in the UK is Brexit. Brexit has become a sort of vampire that sucks the blood out of our political system and stops us from confronting the real problems, whether they are environmental, whether they are social, whether they are economic. In case you were expecting a balanced chair, Remain versus Leave, I'm afraid you haven't got one. This is... And I must stress here, this is really important. This is not a university occasion, although I used to work for the university. This is a Berkshire for Europe occasion. That is to say, Berkshire for Europe has rented the hall. We are grateful to the university for hosting us on a commercial basis. And Berkshire for Europe is a Remain organisation of European citizens who want to remain European citizens and who do not accept the referendum result. And I think there are three reasons for not accepting the referendum result. One is Sarah Wollaston's analogy about the patient who agrees to drastic surgery, but who has the opportunity, once the details are clear, to take a final decision before going under the scalpel. Secondly, the positives, and I'm sure you can all, judging from your response, you can all think of them. For me, it's the freedom to live and love and work and retire and get married in any one of 28 countries across the European Union. I'm sure you can think of many others. Some were on the screen just now. Third reason for not accepting the referendum result lies in the nature of the Brexit project as it revealed itself to us during the referendum campaign and after. It's a project characterised by lies and dishonesty and untenable promises and dirty money and xenophobia. Remember that Nigel Farage, shortly after the result, said we won without a single bullet being fired. A week after a Labour MP was shot 3 times and then stabbed by a British nationalist. That alone for me makes it not just a right but a duty to try and get another result. Now, the Brexiters haven't succeeded yet in stripping us of our European citizenship. We find ourselves, therefore, before a democratic vote in which the people of the UK will have the opportunity to send representatives to the Strasbourg Parliament and also to send a message about what they think of Brexit. And I want, just for 5 minutes or so, first to talk you through the way these elections work for those who haven't quite grasped the system, and also to point you to 1 or 2 opinion polls which might give us a bit of a context for our discussion. So, unlike a general election in the UK, our European elections are held on a proportional basis, sort of. The UK is divided for these elections into 12 regions. We are in the South-East region. The South-East runs from Kent to Oxfordshire and from the Isle of Wight to Milton Keynes, not including, of course, London. It elects 10 MEPs out of a total of 70 in Great Britain, plus 3 more in Northern Ireland. We will vote on a proportional list system, the so-called DONT or highest average system. We will vote for lists of candidates. The seats will be distributed according to vote distribution in the region. To say every vote counts is certainly a lot truer in this system than it is in first past the post, but it is not 100% true. There are quite a lot of lists competing for just 10 seats, and the DONT system clearly gives an advantage to highest scoring lists. In our region in 2014, the 10 MEPs were distributed as follows: 4 UKIP, 3 Tories, 1 Lib Dem, here present tonight, 1 Green, 1 Labour. Those MPs, and I think it's quite important to stress this, went on to Strasbourg to sit in different transnational groups. One of the first things that happened way back in the days of the European coal and steel community, when the predecessors of MEPs were delegates from national parliaments, was that they trooped into the Common Assembly of the coal and steel community. Everyone expected them to sit in national groups, but they didn't. They grouped themselves as socialists, as Christian Democrats, as liberals, and so on, and that has remained the same today. So what results can we expect now from these elections on the basis of our polls. One moment and I will try and show you. Here's, first of all, do we have a screen? Yep. Here we go. Maximize. Yeah. Okay. So this is for Great Britain, not including Northern Ireland, therefore. This is the last YouGov poll. It's a really big poll done in the past 10 days or so, and it shows voting intentions and seat projections for Great Britain, not Northern Ireland. It doesn't make altogether comfortable reading. As you can see, 34% and 32 seats for the Brexit Party, 17% for the Lib Dems, 15% for Labour, 11% for Greens, 4% for ChangeUK, 4% for the Nationalists, 9% for the Tories, 3% for UKIP. If we turn a moment to this constituency, because the poll was big enough to do a sort of realistic run for this constituency, we find, okay, 5% for ChangeUK, 0 seats. 11.1% for Greens, 1 seat. 10% for Labour, 1 seat. 21% for Lib Dems, 2 seats. 37% for the Brexit Party, 5 seats. 10.9% for the Conservatives, 1. 3% for UKIP, 0. Now, how should we be interpreting these polls, especially in the light of a succession of opinion polls on Leave or Remain, which appeared to show a consistent Remain lead? How do we sort of fit these two together? Well, I haven't delved into the details of the psephology, but let me give you a sort of pessimistic and an optimistic spin on these. The pessimistic one is that in the Leave Remain polls, there were always a lot of undecideds, and those undecideds, given the offer of the slick Brexit Party inviting us to get it over with, those hesitant voters have switched to become Brexiters. And if that happens, if that remains the same on Thursday, then we will not get a very good result. A more optimistic interpretation looks like this. First of all, we can't wholly trust the polls. If the polls had been right, then we wouldn't be here now, because Remain would have won. In 2014, UKIP at one point was polling, I think a week before the poll, at 35%. It finished at 27.6%. So those results are not set in stone. Second, the polls for Thursday do not show undecideds. It seems to me quite plausible to suggest that lots and lots of Leave voters have decided very clearly what they want to do, but there are still a lot of undecided Remain voters because of the fragmentation of the offer on the Remain side, which of course is where we come in this evening, mobilising our side and helping bewildered Remainers to make a choice. Final question before I hand over to the candidates. What would be a good outcome for Remainers? Yes, certainly, seats matter. It is important that the European Parliament should have as few anti-EU nationalists of whatever stripe as possible and as many good Europeans. On the other hand, a majority of UK seats for any particular group is less crucial than for a UK election. So maybe our prime goal should be focusing on the number of Remain votes against the number of Brexit votes. But of course, if we get MEPs who sit for fully 5 years, that will mean we will have won. That is what we need to hope for, and we hope that our candidates will help us achieve this goal. Now, what's going to happen now is I'm going to ask each of them in turn to make a short 5-minute or so statement. Then I will open up to questions which some of you have been good enough to submit in advance. Then, if and only if there is time for questions from the floor, we will take them. We need to end at 9:25, 9:30 grand maximum in order to be out of the building by 10 at the very, very latest. Thank you very much. One moment, please. So if we can have our first candidate, Catherine Bearder, who I believe, yes, do get up, who I believe was the only Liberal Dem MP to be elected in 2014. She served for 10 years. She served on committees on regional development, women's rights and environmental issues in the European Parliament, and has been one of the EP's 5 quaestors who look after the financial and administrative interests of MEPs. She's president of the Green Liberal Democrats and has a special interest in biodiversity protection and fighting human trafficking, and she is the Lib Dems #1. Do you want to be here or do you want to go over there?
Oh, we'll stand from here. You can all see me and you can all hear me, yes? Good, lovely. Well, thank you very much, Berkshire for Europe, for organising this session. As we've just heard, I mean, it's very difficult when you're looking at that to wonder how we can turn it around, but we can. Basically, on Thursday, the voters have 2 choices. They either vote to continue the chaos that is freezing up our government and freezing up Westminster. We can all see that Westminster is in stasis. They cannot move forward. And it has highlighted the fact that we have a system that was designed for the 19th century trying to operate in the 21st century. It won't work, it won't move forward in the way that we are at the moment. And there is no real function, and for so many people they are looking not just from this country wondering what on earth is going on with our so-called government, but the world is looking on, and we are being so damaged around the world by this inability to work out. They said it was going to be so easy. They said we were going to have all these deals done on the first day. Mrs May even triggered Article 50 without any plan. And I know from sitting in the European Parliament the frustration from our European colleagues that there's no plan come forward. And that, of course, leaves the door wide open for Farage and his bully boys. And they don't believe in democracy. They don't obey the rules that we all obey. We know that the Met is now investigating the Leave campaign. Channel 4 is now investigating. I was on Channel 4 earlier today talking to Jon Snow in my role as a quester, which is a bit like the trade union rep in the Parliament, reporting Nigel Farage for not declaring the funding that he's getting from banks and his friends. But they will turn the UK citizens into victims. They say that the European Union is making us do this, and it's a form of victimisation, and we know that that's not true. And that is why I'm here to say to you, vote Liberal Democrat on Thursday to stop Brexit. Full stop. Let's stop it. And that is the what. That's not the how. The how is we put it back to a democratic vote. Whatever plan we have, whatever negotiations that our government manages somehow to get, there is a deal there. It's Mrs May's deal. Nobody else in the cabinet wants it, but it's there. And so this week, that poll, as we've just heard, will demonstrate how we go forward. And yet the bonus is that you get MEPs who work hard for you. The more MEPs that you get from the Brexit Party, the less our voice will be heard in the European Union. And I never understand how they can say putting it back to the people is not democratic. For me, that's mad. For me, as a Liberal Democrat, Britain's place is at the heart of Europe, shaping its future, working on those huge issues that have been a huge benefit to us because we are members, but also the threats, the global threats. We have the science here. I know the funding that has come to Reading University, the opportunity to travel and work and live in anywhere on the European Union, the banking services, the all of that has come. But for me, as you heard, my real big driver is what we are doing to the planet. It is quite climate change, but it is also biodiversity loss. What are we doing to the seas? What are we doing to every living creature on this planet that are facing? And of course, what happens if they go? We go too. So it's because I recognise the benefits that the planet has given us, but also for the future of my family and my children, my grandchildren. That is why Europe is so important to me. So Brits are not a nation to run away from a fight. We should be standing there in Europe, helping make the rules, shaping Europe for our future. So this week we need to be electing MEPs, and I'm going to ask you to reject the Tories' failed Brexit. Reject Labour's support for Brexit. Now, I know John has worked very hard, but actually in Westminster, Labour are supporting Mrs May's Brexit. Reject the soft and hard, or even the no-deal Brexit that Farage is offering. On Thursday, vote Liberal Democrat to stop Brexit. Thank you very much.
Elise Benjamin has been a Green Party member for 35 years. She served as Oxford City Councillor 1999 to 2002 and 2004 to 2016, which is quite a long run. Chaired the Planning Committee, the Economic Development Committee, the Area Committee, and was the first Green Lord Mayor of Oxford in 2011-2012. Within the Green Party, she has also been Regional Liaison Officer for Caroline Lucas MEP and Keith Taylor MEP. She is the Green Party's number 2.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. I'm standing here now, very proud to be part of a party that has stood strong on Remain since the disastrous referendum 3 years ago. And before the referendum, I was out every day. We had local elections, so I had to do that as well. But every single day for 2 months, I ran stalls in Oxford to talk to voters, to get people to understand what we would lose. I'm also proud to be campaigning in this election with Caroline Lucas, who, as you've heard, is a former South-East MEP. It was Caroline who first proposed the People's Vote 8 days after the referendum as part of a 6-point plan to start to mend post-referendum Britain. And I'm proud that Greens were the ones warning that the dangers of austerity long ago, before anyone else, what those dangers would be. We understood that austerity would hit the poorest hardest, and we were clear that austerity, and we are clear that austerity has played a big part in people feeling so left behind that they voted leave. So, what do we do about Brexit? For Greens, this election is more than just maximising the Remain vote. And that is crucial, absolutely crucial. But it's about actually staying in the EU, and it's about what kind of EU we want. We need MEPs willing to tackle the social and economic problems that are causing division and a growing support for the far right across the EU. Greens have a track record of working on a wide range of issues, from ending corporate tax avoidance to supporting refugees. And I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone here tonight that, of course, Greens have tackling climate change as an absolute priority. We can no longer wait for other political parties to wake up to the serious work that needs to be done in a very short time to halt the worst impacts of climate change. And it is very serious work. It's not tweaking around an economic system. And if other politicians are afraid to stand up to those who peddle hatred and intolerance of migrants, how are they going to react when more and more people are forced out of their home countries as a result of climate change? The migrant crisis we've seen in recent years is a small insight into what's to come if we don't take urgent action on climate change. And it's thanks to Green MEPs that European Parliament recognises the role climate change is playing in driving migration and displacement. And this is not the time to be isolating ourselves from our nearest neighbours, pulling up the drawbridge when we need to be building bridges. So for Greens we offer hope. A hope that is based on detailed policies to tackle climate change, on an understanding that the 1% shouldn't be allowed to profit from the exploitation of people and planet, and on a manifesto that rejects the economic model that is trashing our planet and fueling poverty and hunger. And we offer a strong force in European politics, standing together with Green colleagues from across the EU. We recognise the EU needs to change. It's the persistence of Green MEPs that have delivered so many successes, from investment in renewable energy to the banning of unnecessary plastics. Green MEPs have been the driving force in the adoption of clean energy for all legislation, defining how the EU and member states will put the Paris Climate Agreement into practice. And because of that action by Green MEPs, the European Parliament's position on the Paris Climate Agreement is far broader and more ambitious than that of a national government. It's Green MEPs who have pushed for a recognition that women are more adversely affected by climate change, ensuring that the European Parliament adopted a strong position recognising the effects of climate change on gender. And it's thanks to Green MEPs that the European Parliament has adopted a definition of climate justice that highlights the threat to human rights and development, recognising that the immediate and enormous burden that climate change poses to some countries must be shared by all. So it's Green MEPs who have been championing people and planet before profit, recognising that a green economy will create jobs and improve our quality of life. We can't continue with business as usual. A business as usual that doesn't understand planetary boundaries. So in this election, Greens are saying loud and proud, yes to Europe, no to climate change, because an extreme Brexit puts many of the environmental protection laws we currently have at risk. Laws that help clean our beaches, laws that force manufacturers to improve white goods performance, laws that have protected our valuable countryside. This is a time when we desperately need to unite for the future of our planet. And the Green Party is already doing that in 103 countries across the globe. We are the most credible option for those who want to remain in the European Union, the most likely to deliver the change necessary to move to a more equal society, and the natural home for those who want to see urgent action on climate change. And I'm proud that we are once again standing on a common manifesto with Green colleagues across the EU, a manifesto that puts reform of the EU and tackling climate change as top priorities. And I'll leave you with a quote from that manifesto. A vote for the Greens is a vote for change. It is a vote to not let go of Europe, but to make it into what it was promised to be. A union not of self-interest, but of shared responsibility. A union not for financial gains for the few, but for economic and social progress for all. A union that leads the world by protecting people and the planet. Thank you.
John Howarth, MEP, almost a local boy, born in Newcastle, has served on Berkshire County Council and Reading Borough Council, as well as the South East England Regional Assembly, and he was chair of Reading Labour Party from 1990 to 1994. In 1995, he founded his own business, providing marketing consulting services and later brand design and business communications. He has served in the European Parliament since 2017, when he succeeded Elise Dodds, who stood down to contest successfully Oxford East. He is Labour's #1 candidate.
Thank you, Chair. Take it you want me to use this infernal thing for the purposes of broadcast.
Just so.
Yeah, okay. I tend to be a bit loud with a microphone, so I'll try not to be. Okay, first of all, thanks for that introduction. It's always nice to come back to Reading University, where I served as a member of the council of this institution for 11 years. It's also great to see so many Liberal Democrats in Reading. We haven't seen so many Liberal Democrats in Reading since they went into coalition with the Tories on Reading Borough Council. That lasted 12 months and they now have, is it one councillor? Something like that. Anyway, never mind. I'm going to talk first of all about the values and the manifesto that the Party of European Socialists, the Socialist and Democrat group, the second largest group in the European Parliament, and the Labour Party are standing on in this election. Because we may be there for 5 minutes, we may be there till the 31st of October. I take personal offence to that, by the way, because that's my birthday. And we may be there till the end of 2020, or we may be there for 5 years. So I think that you need to consider the values of the candidates, you need to consider the values of the parties when you vote in this election, and you don't want to mess with anything tactical with the D'Hondt system, because frankly it does not work. Anyway, first of all, tax justice. Tax justice is the most important question of the age. It's one that can only be addressed through the European Parliament. It is absolutely key to the future, because one of the factors that created Brexit in the first place is the feeling of the guy who comes to fix your plumbing and works as a self-employed businessman and can't avoid paying corporation tax, that he is paying more corporation tax potentially in a year than Amazon or Facebook or someone like that who can move themselves between jurisdictions. It is absolutely key that that is tackled, because we need a new settlement between people, corporations and government that was wrecked in this country in the 1980s by Margaret Thatcher and has never been truly redressed. The second most urgent problem, and by far the most urgent problem for the whole of the planet, is climate action. The Greens are sincere about this, absolutely, we work with them in the Parliament, but it is the work of the second largest group that pulls the centre of the Parliament towards climate action, and we want to move towards a zero carbon economy by 2050. The third question I think you need to be looking at is a question of data and automation, because that is going to affect the future of the economy and everything that is done in it. And I hope that the European Parliament is ahead of the game on this, but generally legislators aren't. They're usually running to catch up. And unless we get to grips with that, we'll continue the situation where the next industrial revolution, the next major technological change, will do exactly the same as all those other technological changes. They will make a few people massively wealthy, and they will diminish the prospects of many others at the bottom end of the scale. So that needs to be just also. And finally, we need to manage migration. And by that I mean, don't mean migration within the European Union, I mean migration to the European Union, because that's going to be driven by climate change too, and potentially by conflict. And we either have that in an organised and legal way, or we continue with migration crises. And that's something that we've got to get to grips with together. Catherine, where were we on the 23rd of March?
Were we in Strasbourg?
No, we were both on Eurostar on the way to the People's Vote March, the third People's Vote March. And this is what I mean about elections potentially shattering alliances. And you need to consider this also. Because if you want to make a statement about Brexit is bad, then, you know, vote with your heart, vote for the Liberal Democrats or whatever. But the fact is, if you want to stop Brexit, then you need to think about it seriously. And you need to vote with your values, because the fact of the matter is, there are 203 members of the Labour Party in the House of Commons who have already voted for a public vote. There are 15 MEPs from the Labour Party standing at this election who are in favour of a public vote. There's 88% of the Labour Party membership that's in favour of the public vote. And you know those graphs that he showed earlier? If you cast Labour as a Brexit party, you will have a Brexit... It isn't. You will have a Brexit majority the day after these elections, and I suggest that Vince Cable and Catherine are going to be wriggling around to try to explain that, when the fact of the matter is you would not even be having these elections if it wasn't for the work of the Socialists and Democrats within the Parliament. Because I'll tell you something else, the leader of the Aldi group in the Parliament wants Britain out, and he said so. And I can find the quotes for you if you really want me to, but he said it at the Brussels plenary round about the 4th of April. So I suggest that you bear it in mind when you vote, that you vote for what you believe in, that you vote for the policies you believe in, and the change you want to see in the European Union to make it a European Union for people as well as a European Union for profit. Thanks for listening.
Eleanor Fuller is a novice in politics. She used to be a diplomat, which isn't quite the same thing. She is, I think, an eminent European, however, having served as the UK ambassador to the Council of Europe, which, as we all know, is not the same thing as the EU, but happens to be in Strasbourg, so familiar to those in the European Parliament. She has also served in Paris, Tel Aviv, Vienna and Geneva. She is number 4 on ChangeUK's list.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Berkshire for Europe, for having me here this evening. I was asked to address the question of what motivated me to stand. Well, you, Mr. Chairman, and others have already painted a very clear picture of what Brexit has brought to this country and what it means. And I can only agree with what has been said. But one aspect that particularly affected me in the whole mess that we've been in the last 3 years is the loss of our country's influence in the world. So I was a diplomat for many years, as you have said, as chairman. And for me, it's self-evident that to influence today's world, we have to have obviously a vast network of bilateral relations with countries, but we also have to be at the top table in every international organisation that is making decisions that affect all of us, and that includes the European Union. And so that's really the reason that I wanted to put myself forward into politics for the very first time. After all, the European Union is the biggest international project on our continent. Things are decided there which affect us whether we're a member or not. And I think we should be a member and influence those decisions. And also, there's another aspect to it, and it was that the Brexit battles that have absorbed us over the last 3 years have been very ugly. And they continue to be. We see the main parties increasingly dominated by their right and left wings respectively. We see the resurgence of anti-Semitism. We thought we'd said goodbye to that, didn't we, some time ago. Also the normalisation of discourse which is anti-Muslim or misogynist. I can't accept that in this country. I don't think it reflects the values that define us as a country. And frankly, I was finding it very difficult to recognise the moderate, diverse and generous-spirited Britain that I was really proud to represent as an ambassador overseas. Then ChangeUK came along, standing for a different kind of politics, a politics based on values and on evidence, and making a strong and unequivocal case for remaining in the European Union. Every member of our party supports remaining in the European Union and a people's vote. They were talking my language. And I knew that I wanted to add my voice to their campaign. And so I'm very grateful that I was given the opportunity to do so as a novice, and our list of candidates for the South East is indeed very diverse. for example, includes equal number of men and women, old and young, those with political experience and those of completely different experience. We have one citizen of another European country also on our list in the South-East. Now, ChangeUK candidates elected to the European Parliament, they're going to present a face of Britain that seems to me lacking in political life in this country today. Engaged, constructive, open to the world, bring a positive influence to bear in debates and in decision making. I was also asked to say what would be my interests as a member of the European Parliament. My own interests obviously lie in foreign affairs, in development and in human rights. But knowing that question, I thought I might answer, I would show interest in and delve into any question which was of importance to people in the southeast of England, since that is the region that we represent. But actually, when I came to look at everything that European Parliament does and what its committees covers, I realised that every one of the European Parliament's committees covers issues of importance to this region. So that only reinforced my view that we need to be there and to be part of it. So we have been somewhat criticised for not forming an alliance with other parties, which is, I would say, somewhat unjust to us as the new kids on the block. I didn't notice an alliance being formed between the parties who already remain parties and who actually had the opportunity to do so since they were already formed by November last year, which was the deadline for forming an alliance and announcing it to the Electoral Commission. But that said, the important thing for us in this election is to maximise the Remainer vote, and that is what we are seeking to do, to bring more people to this site and to bring them out and so that we have a stronger Remain vote in this week's election. And I would say it is obviously difficult to decide between the parties. There a great deal of what has been said at this table I would agree with. However, I'm not sure that a tactical vote is such a bad thing in these elections if you're undecided. And I note that the website remainervote.com suggests that in this region, it's by a very complicated model, mathematical model, suggests that to maximise the number of seats for Remainer parties, a vote for ChangeUK would be correct. It makes makes different choices according to the region. South-East and the UK. And London are the ones where ChangeUK would be the favoured tactical vote, we are told by this website. Yes, we don't use that kind of language, though. I would just like to add one thing, and this is that our parties come out in the last couple of days to make clear that we may have to support revoking Article 50. Because we think that's the best way to ensure that we do have a people's vote. We feel we need to be honest about that at this stage of the debate. There may not be time to organise a people's vote before the deadline of my neighbour's birthday. So I hope it'll be a better birthday for him if we've revoked Article 50 or had a people's vote by then. So we've said that, and we've made clear that if it's a choice between revoking Article 50 and no deal, then we would definitely be in favour of revoking Article 50 to create space for a people's vote. Thank you very much.
Pacelli Ndikumana is the number one candidate for the UK-EU party. He was born in Burundi. He grew up in Belgium before returning to Burundi, where he completed his education and became a lawyer, active in defending political opponents of the regime. As a result, he was detained for a year without charge. He escaped in 2000 and came to the UK as an asylum seeker and became a UK citizen in 2005. He currently works in the UK as a lawyer defending minority group rights and also specialising in the law of sanctions.
Thank you very much for this presentation. As you've just heard, it's a pleasure for me to actually to come here and to present our new party, which is the UK EU party. We decided to create this party with a couple of lawyers who works and other professionals in London. I work in London, I live in London, but I am the lead candidate for this party, the UK EU party. What exactly what do we stand for? Because this is where it's important to stress the difference between the Remainers. We were the first party to actually advocate revocation of Article 50. There is no reason why we should stick with this article. First of all, we decided that it's actually in our power. We could revoke it. We don't see any reasons why we're still talking about this referendum, which, to our belief, had many sort of issues. First of all, we don't believe that the nature of that questions should be put to the public because it's such a complex issue. And even for people who are extremely, who have done loads of research in economics, in finance, it's extremely difficult to answer questions related to remain or leave UK. Under our current system in the UK, the instrument which was enacted regarding the referendum, there is no provisions within that instrument which actually made it binding to actually any result should be binding to Parliament. So there is a lack of clarity, and to our understanding, the results of the referendum should have been just a consultative result and not binding to Parliament. It's clear this is the rule of law. It's democracy. It's actually in the Act. It's actually clear that it's not binding to Parliament. The result should normally, it's for the Parliament to decide what course of action to take. Thirdly, the nature of the campaign, the Leave campaign, there has been loads of anomalies and probably misleading statements and probably even fraud in terms of the right, some the fundings which we found later on after the referendum, which in terms of the finance, in terms of the data that has been actually the data privacy, which have been infringed. We believe that all these issues have actually affected the just and fair referendum which was actually put to the people in 2016. For all these reasons, we do not respect the result of the referendum, and Article 50 should be revoked. This is where we are different. The other point is probably it was asked me to explain why personally I am a passionate European. I believe that the UK will actually gain its global force, its global power within organizations like EU, like all these. That's where actually the power of the UK can be exercised, and that's where it gets a huge leverage. The other point that I believe it's important, although we are for Remain and we are on the extreme because we want to revoke Article 50, we believe that Europe needs to be reformed. The EU needs to be reformed. Sometimes I'm thinking, a couple of months ago, I was looking into the EU and I couldn't find what's the budget, how many funds each commissioner is actually using, where there is no transparency. You can't find exactly how the procurement system works, which company has actually won, has bid for these services. We need clarity, transparency. We need to improve the way Brussels works. It's such a big. Thank you. So I'm gonna just be quite close my presentation and insist that for security reason, for security, for trade, finance, especially finance and legal services in London, we will be affected, really affected if we leave the UK, if we leave the EU. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move over to the questions, and I'd like to kick off, please, with Graham Wood. Is there... Oh, that's wonderful. You're right here.
Hello, my question to the panel is about democracy. In 2016, whether one is a Brexiteer or Remainer, the referendum delivered a clear result. We have Boris Johnson as a Prime Minister in waiting, a Brexiteer. The people appear to have spoken again, if these statistics are correct. I ask this as a staunch Remainer. Does there come a point when one has to acknowledge that the Brexiteers won in 2016, they still appear to be winning, and it's difficult to reconcile calls for revoking Article 50 of People's Vote with democracy? And I'd just be interested in the panel's views on that.
7% isn't a majority. John Howarth.
I mean, I really don't think heckling the questioner helps. It's really not a great idea. Graham? Yeah, Graham. I think respecting the referendum meant the following. There was a decision, right? Now, I think it was dodgy too, but that's not a winning position, right? That's not a winning position. And I think calling for new votes the day after a referendum is simply getting the people who voted to leave to dig their heels in and not consider any arguments, because what you're telling them is that their opinions are not worthwhile. They don't matter. They're stupid. They're northern, right? I know people who voted whichever way, for whichever reason, and some of them I know have changed their minds. But there's a process that gets them to that point, and I think the first thing is saying, okay, there's been a referendum. All referenda in the UK are advisory. The government is mandated to go off and negotiate a settlement. Now, a sensible government would have said, okay, we've got a 48-52 vote. That's close. What we're going to do is we're going to set up an all-party convention in the House of Commons. We're going to discuss how we actually formulate a plan and how we bring the country together and how we get a proposition together to implement this position. And they might have thought about what the steps down that road were, because they had a mandate, whether we like it or not. And I do not like it for a minute. I believe there's no good Brexit, but that's the position. But they didn't do that, you see. They played to the extremes, the far ends of the Conservative Party. And they put together a position for the benefit of the Conservative Party, not for the benefit of anybody else. And in doing that, they wrecked their chances of building a consensus in this country for whatever solution came out of that referendum. And I think that was, well, from my point of view, maybe that was fortunate. But from the country's point of view, it has undoubtedly driven home the division that exists in this country. That referendums create divisions. They are not good things. So where do we find ourselves now? We find ourselves in a position where we have a deal that nobody likes, because there's no good Brexit, but also because there are only two sorts of Brexit. There's the soft and pointless Brexit, where we stay close to the European institutions, minimise the economic damage and have no say whatsoever. Or there's the hard and very painful Brexit, where we have food shortages, shortages of medicines, shortages of people, and massive economic damage to the country. And there's one or the other. And Theresa May's deal incorporates in many respects the worst of both worlds, and it's blindfold because that 25-page political declaration says nothing about our future relationships. And I understand that people want to get it over with. They're sick of it. I'm sick of it. Catherine's sick of it. We get paid to do it and we're sick of it. But, you know, we've got to find a way of breaking the deadlock and moving ahead. And the only way we can break the deadlock and move ahead is go back to people. And the thing about that, and what I say about democracy, is this. It's proved undeliverable. And it's proved undeliverable because the promises that were made could never be delivered within Brexit. And the problem with referendums, you see, when you go into coalition with the Tories on Reading Borough Council, the electorate passes a verdict on you quite quickly. Right, come on, I'm winding you up, man. They pass a verdict on you. If Labour governs badly, they get thrown out. If the Conservatives govern badly, they get the majority taken away. Whatever, right? We get to decide again. But with referenda, we don't. And I want to hold account to account the people who promised 350 million for the NHS. For all of those other things. I want to say, what is the reality? Because Project Fantasy and Project Fear need to be put together with Project Reality and the deal that we've got. But if we lose again, which we might, then I suggest that it would be very serious consequences for this country if we didn't at least acquiesce to the position that would then exist. You know, I think that's where we are. I don't think it's the end of democracy, and that's why I think it's legitimate to come back to the people.
Thank you.
Oh, democracy. Well, where do I begin? I've been questioning all my adult life whether we really live in a proper democracy in this country, because we have a broken electoral system. It's increasingly proven to be broken. We have a poor political education in this country. I remember asking at school why we couldn't learn basic stuff like taxes, basic stuff like what a local council is. And I was told, oh, well, the teachers might be politically biased. Well, put it down in a curriculum and make it simple for everyone to understand. And then you get results, better educated results. And actually, I take issue with not putting a vote to the people because the people might not understand the detail. People can understand the detail if they're allowed to. So, traditional politics doesn't know how to run proper elections. I absolutely disagree that referendums don't work. They work if they're run properly. They work if they're run fairly. Switzerland have just decided to overturn a referendum and start again because it wasn't run properly. That's democracy. And what we must never do is we must never give in to poor democratic process. We must never, ever give in to bullying, and we must never give in to the fascists like Farage and his friends in the EU. And I've been saying right from the start, we had a rally, we had meetings and rallies the month after the referendum, a kind of a repair job in Oxford because we have a huge number of EU citizens who were just lost. And I said right from the start, as a speaker for the Greens in all our rallies, that we have to absolutely go and talk to Leave voters, because I understand, I represented as a councillor a very, very mixed ward. So I actually absolutely understand where a lot of Leave voters are coming from. I saw it in my own family as well. Some voted Remain, but quite a lot voted Leave. We have to get out and talk to people. If you talk to people, they make better decisions. And that's what this is all about. That's what democracy is about.
Thank you.
Well, I think it was Einstein who said that the definition of madness was repeating the same thing over and over in hope of getting a different result. I think it's quite clear that the question is different now. The referendum was decided on the basis of a lot of fantasies and promises that couldn't be delivered, and that is now clear. And that's why I think that having a people's vote, with the knowledge that we now have and the country now has, is the only way forward. It's very complex, isn't it, this question of referenda and democracy, because whether you like the electoral system or not, the Parliament was also elected democratically. And so you have two different democratic mandates there, which have clashed, and I think that has been the difficulty why the system that we now have has not been able to deliver any kind of Brexit that would find a consensus. Fortunately, I may say. So I don't think it's a big issue, the democracy, if the question is different. After all, if you order something from a catalogue and for one thing the delivery of the item is delayed by 3 years, and in the meantime you've discovered that it wasn't what was promised in the first place, you should be allowed to cancel your order, I think.
Pacelli.
Thank you. I'm going to actually here give my not my personal thoughts, but what we believe in our party is that we do believe in democracy. It's important, but then we do also believe in referendum or referenda. What is important is the fact that once a question has been put to a referendum, that the result of that questions would never be binding to Parliament. It's a consultative process. So what we don't understand is that how, on a turnout of 37% of the population and a slight majority, why would we all have to go crazy and leave the EU, on the basis of all these facts? Yes, democracy, it's just a buzzword. Go into the details in the fact and look at them. The misleading campaign, all these issues, the turnout, the difference, why the result has to be binding to Parliament. This is where we stand. We need to revoke Article 50. That's our position. Thank you.
And Catherine.
Thank you very much. Well, a lot has been covered in the answers already. True, we had a referendum. The fact was that the turnout was low, that there were lies, misinformation, overspending, and we know that has not adequately been investigated now. And then, so we have a referendum, and people voted for a myriad of reasons. My son's best friend, who has lived in Germany for some years, voted to leave. And my son said, well, why? And he said, well, because I wanted to give the government a kicking. You know, there's everything in a simple yes-no referendum that people vote. They don't have the housing, they don't have the jobs, they don't have a pension. They will vote in an angry way. And those people who posed the question ran away. Farage ran away, Cameron ran away, and we were left with Mrs May, who all she could come up with, Brexit is Brexit. She still hasn't got a plan. She is the only one who has set the red lines. She tried to get it through the Chequers. Do you remember the Chequers plan? That's when all her ministers started running away because they couldn't agree with it. Nobody in her cabinet really even believes in Brexit. There is no good Brexit. John's talking about a soft Brexit. There is no such thing. We are full members or we are out, and we will be out without an agreement. So we've 3 years on, we still have only Mrs May's agreement, and Corbyn has supposed to be the opposition in Westminster. They haven't been opposing and holding her feet to the fire on Brexit. So my colleagues in the European Union and Parliament say, well, surely there was a threshold on a referendum. No, it was a simple majority. So, I mean, doubly, the rules were not there. Just have a think about when the Good Friday referendum was dealt with, how that brought people back together. What did they do? They negotiated the deal, and then every voter got a copy of the Northern Ireland Agreement for them. They were well informed. They made sure that they were well informed. Then they voted. So that is why we now say of course people are fed up with Brexit. As John says, we're all fed up to the back teeth. It is costing jobs, it's costing investment into this country. Meanwhile, the planet is going to hell in a handcart because we're talking about Brexit, not getting on with the real things that we should be doing. For me, I think we absolutely have to say full stop to Brexit. And then let us then decide what have we got. If we have a deal that has been agreed with the European Union, then put that to the people. Don't shilly-shally and say, oh, well, I've got to have 3. No, let's have 4 votes in Westminster. Nobody wants it, Mrs May. Chuck it out, give it back to the people and say, is this what you want? When we voted in the original referendum, it was remain with what we know we've got or leave for something else. Now we know what the something else looks like, put that back to the people and stop Brexit. Thank you.
I'd now like to group 2 questions, one from Pushkin Chowdhury and the other from Edward Mitchell. Are they both here? Pushkin Chowdhury first of all then.
So with the Brexit Party topping the Euro-election polls, how can a splintering of the Remain vote be avoided? Simple question.
Thank you. And Edward Mitchell. Is Edward Mitchell here?
As your graph implies, the Brexit Party is gaining support from UKIP and Brexiteers from other parties. In hindsight, could the pro-Remain parties not counter the Brexit Party most effectively by running as a single party, given the danger the UK faces?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I think I did actually address it to some extent, at least in my original remarks. For us in ChangeUK, it's about maximising the Remain vote. I'm afraid it was too late for us when our party was formed, which was, after all, only 4 weeks ago. It was too late to form an alliance because the Electoral Commission requires alliances to have been formed by November last year, when we didn't exist. So that wasn't an option. We feel that some Remain votes will come to us which wouldn't have gone to the other parties, and therefore we will maximise the number of votes. And so I'm afraid, I know this question has been asked many times, but we hope that our presence in the field will maximise the number of Remain votes and will show the strength, more clearly the strength of feeling on this issue in the country at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. I can't remember actually the nature of your questions. Sorry. Splitting votes. Yes. Okay. Right. This is quite an interesting question because initially when we created our party, that was back just in March. It's not long ago. It's out of frustration, and we couldn't actually rely on Lib Dem, considering the past, the pledge that they have made on some issues that I probably wouldn't need to raise here, and the fact that they have disappointed their electors. We thought we couldn't even rely on Labour Party. Change don't even know even the name of their party. They keep changing the names. We don't even know their policies. So we decided, actually, out of all these issues, let's create a party which definitely will stand for revoking Article 50. That was our purpose. It's in our name. We want to remain in the EU. That's why, facing such a question, it's a bit difficult to us. It's sad because, yes, there could be the risk of diluting some, the risk is there, but the proportional representative system, and especially the don't methods, tend to actually to reduce the risk of actually losing votes. So it is actually, there is a risk, but then obviously we still believe that if there is already a strong majority for Remain, if that majority would actually show up in the result, it would, because of the representative system. What about the other questions? I think
they were pretty much
the same.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Catherine.
Oh, yeah, okay. We'll pass the mic down. You know that pub quiz question? Can you name a famous Belgian? You'll never forget De Hunt, will you? He was a Belgian mathematician, and he governs our life in the European Parliament, determines the size of the group, how many places you have on a committee, who gets to be elected as chair. De Hunt rules in the Parliament, I tell you, and it also makes it very difficult because it's not a true proportional system. As a Lib Dem, you probably know that I would rather have a single transferable vote, and then you, like they do in the Netherlands, so you vote even on the ballot paper. They're very big in the Netherlands, and so you vote for a party and you vote for a candidate, and that is much better, I think, form of democracy. Well, who should you vote for to stop splitting the vote? Well, that's kind of easy, isn't it? You vote for the Lib Dems. You have a look on. It's gone now from the screen, but that it is only a handful of votes that will separate us from winning 2-3 MEPs. And when you look at that very high bar for the Brexit Party, it isn't the Brexit Party. It's Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage's backers and their funny money, and that's why I was on Channel 4 tonight, because I've reported him to the President. They're finding out sources of his income. But in that Nigel Farage Brexit Party are all the Tory votes. So he isn't forming a new party. He hasn't got a manifesto. He hasn't got any policies. He is scooping up Conservative voters. And for me, that's disingenuous. Instead of saying, look, okay, I've left the UKIP party. I mean, there were only, how many were originally elected of 20-something, 24 MEPs? There were 4 left in the Parliament now of UKIP. 2-3 of them sit with the National Front, the others are independents, and some of them have come back behind Nigel. Why did he not say, I am joining the Conservatives so that we can deliver Brexit? That's what really annoys me about this vote. So in order to stop Nigel and the Conservatives delivering a poor, second-rate future for our country, you need to vote Liberal Democrat on Thursday. Then we will really send that message through. We want to stop Brexit. Thank you.
We keep on being told the justification for Brexit is how the parties that are enabling Brexit got the most votes in 2017. Well, we also know that a lot of people voted very tribally and weren't voting on Brexit, they were voting on a general election. So what this is actually about is the overall Remain vote. I'm getting actually quite fed up with people being tied in knots by this poll, that poll, polls with different weightings, national polls being translated into regional polls. This is not the best PR system, but it is a PR system. And it does benefit smaller parties. We've had an MEP in the South East region for 20 years. We've had one in London for 20 years. We've had one in the South West for 5 years. We've currently got more MEPs than any other Remain party in the UK. So that's round one. Round two is the fact that this is about different political platforms. So leaving aside the fact that actually, by the time the Council of Europe met, it was too late for any formal agreements under electoral law to be pulled together for parties, it would be extremely difficult for my party to run on a joint list with other parties when we have some clear ideological differences on the level of climate action and on how much the economy needs to change. Those are really, really core issues. We also have fundamental differences with other parties on freedom of movement. Because for us, freedom of movement is not about quotas or who you let in, who you don't let in. It's about linking it to our defence policy, our foreign affairs policy, our trade policy. Because those are the policies that have led to people fleeing countries. That's what it's about. And also, we sit in different groups in the European Parliament. And for me, my colleagues sit with Greens from across the EU. So if we were to run on a joint list, what would we do if we got joint list MEPs elected? Where would they sit? Who would they work with? It just isn't possible. But as I said, this is a PR election based on Best for Britain data, which a data analyst has done some work on yesterday for us. You can see the predictions in the graph. The predictions at the moment are 1 Green seat, 2 Lib Dem seats. Based on how the remaining votes will go, the closest chance of stopping Brexit Party picking up a 5th seat is actually a Green vote. So think about that, but please actually look at the policies, because that's what matters. If you're so keen, as I am, for us to stay in the EU, this is about who will best represent what you believe in for the next 5 years in the European Parliament.
John? Okay, being a bit of a sad statistical type, which is probably why the Labour Party put me on the Budgets Committee in Brussels, I just want to give you a simple statistic to explain the perversity of the D'Hondt system. In the European elections, Catherine will remember this very well because we were at the count together last time. In the European elections in 2009, with 14.1% of the vote, the Liberal Democrats got 2 members of the European Parliament. In 2014, with 14.7% of the vote, the Labour Party got 1 member of the European Parliament. This is why you can't second guess the D'Hondt system, because it all depends how the party's votes split at the top. And you know, it is a major strategic error to believe that you can turn this election into a proxy referendum, because as I explained at the beginning, what you'd achieve by doing that is a potential defeat. Because if we're going to stop Brexit, and if we're going to achieve a people's vote, they and me and others are going to be having to work together across parties to achieve that. And that's a fact. And if you have a very weakened Remain tendency, if you like, in the Labour Party, with the biggest and most influential lump of it that provides all of the information and so on and keeps the socialist group in line, heavily weakened in the European Parliament, you will weaken Brexit by taking people, the campaign against Brexit, by taking people like me out of the mix. Because the simple maths in the UK are this: there are 12, bless their cotton socks, Liberal Democrat MPs, one of whom is a Brexiteer, by the way. There's one Green MP, and that's not enough to stop Brexit without taking an awful lot of people with them. Yes, you'll take the Scottish nationalists and so on, and you'll take a few Tories and peel off. But if you're going to do it, you've got to do it with Labour MPs. There ain't any other way. So turning this into a proxy referendum is a very, very bad idea, because we've taken the Labour Party a long way and we're going to have to take it further. And without people like me, you won't do that.
Thank you. Okay, unique selling points. Who can I start with? Can I start with Pacelli on unique selling points?
The unique selling point, I probably start with a joke. You can see that I am actually black. Unique. I show the diversity of Britain, the multicultural, multiracial country that we cherish. It's important that actually even Farage, as a lead candidate, can see that actually Britain, the future of Britain, is not only made of actually just the immigrant, the refugees that I am. I started coming here as an asylum seeker. I stayed in Gloucester for a couple of years, then moved to Bristol. I am actually the prototype of a unique, the diversity that we need to show, and to prove that Britain is not just about actually just white middle-class people who live in this country. We are a diverse country. And that's why we thought, I believe that I could put myself forward as a lead candidate. But the big difference between the Remainers party, we actually the purpose is actually for the revoking Article 50. We don't want to turn around asking for a second referendum or a third one, if you take into account the one that was in 1975. But then this is our unique selling point. We believe in diversity. We believe in the fact that Europe is actually a Europe of multiracial, multicultural, and we have to demonstrate that. And also we this is another point, we do recognize that we need to reform EU. There is lots of issues, especially management, which actually, if I were to ask anyone here, you wouldn't even know. There is a big democratic gap between what the EU is for. How do they use the money, the fund that we actually pay? This is our tax money. We are taxpayers. We need to know how EU is actually worked. And this is why we need to change. We need to change the EU within the EU. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go on. I may as well go next. So I've got the mic. Nothing like giving the politician a mic, is there? Can I just say, before I answer the question, how pleased I am that you're here, safe, and how proud I am that I live in a country that can offer asylum to you. While you were talking, I was thinking, it must be about 7 or 8 years ago now, I was in Bujumbura and I was taken to a political rally and they said, Catherine, you must speak to them. And then I spoke and then everybody started singing. I'm just wondering if you're going to be starting singing tonight. But it reminded me that there's so many people in this country and across the continent have been left in limbo because of Brexit. This is people who have exercised their right to move from one country to another and have now found themselves facing hate, facing discrimination, facing verbal abuse on the buses wherever they are, and also not knowing what their status is has left so many. There's about 5 million across the continent left in limbo. And for me, of all the awful things that Brexit brings, the situation that they have been used as bargaining chips is a hugely demeaning thing for this country. So whilst I'm proud on one hand, I'm also really angry about what Mrs May and her Conservative government have done or not done to alleviate the stress that being left in limbo has done. And I also want to just address this issue of revocation of Article 50. I think that makes sense in my head. Yeah, just stop it. It's stupid. Stop Brexit. But until you put something back to the people, what started with the people has got to end with the people. I think just taking it away will leave too much anger here. And I think the only way we can do that is having a proper, grown-up, well-informed, secure, properly monitored electoral process that will bring this country back together, and where we can stop Brexit and move forward with all those other problems that we face in this country and across the continent.
For one thing, we're 100% Remain. Every member of our party supports Remain. The second point I would make is that we believe that the political system in this country has failed us, that it's broken, and that we need to change it. And we will work on that. And the third point that I would make is on our unique selling points, is that we will base our policies on values and evidence and not on ideology.
May I just ask you it's actually Al Neil's question. In which group would ChangeUK MEPs sit?
Very good question, sir. I don't think I can answer that question. I can only say that we will be in a moderate group that will be liberal-minded and pro-business. And more I can't say because the groups are currently so much in flux, and I don't think it's a question I can answer easily at this stage. We will choose that which obviously closest to us in its views.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the Greens European Free Alliance, which includes Plaid Cymru and SNP amongst others, the nice nationalists I call them, is not in flux. We're getting stronger, and the predictions are that we will get even stronger across Europe after this election. So, serious action on climate change. I don't think I really need to say that, but I'll say it again just in case there's any doubt. We have the best track record of any political grouping in the European Parliament on action on climate change, by far. Economic change. We have to move away from an economic system that is unsustainable. Economic growth is hugely unsustainable. It breeds inequality. It harms people and it harms the planet. It's Greens that are saying that. It's Greens that have been saying that for decades, and we will keep on saying it until everyone else realises that that's what we have to tackle. Changing that economy means the simple stuff, well, it should be simple, like corporate tax avoidance, which my colleagues have been working on in the European Parliament. Why do big companies get favourable treatment over and above people? Freedom of movement, I've already said, so another unique selling point. We are absolutely about freedom of movement, but as I said, it has to be married up with other policies. You have to take an holistic approach to every single policy that you come up with as a party. That's a given for us, absolutely. I'm descended from refugees. My family fled persecution in the late 19th century from other parts of Europe, so I am really proud to be part of a political movement across Europe and across the globe that is fighting fascism and is not afraid to stand up and challenge when it needs to be challenged. And I think another really quick example that I think really sums up the differences, and it goes back to that, why the parties couldn't work together in this election. When the TTIP trade talks were happening, the Green Group in the European Parliament were working to get members of other groups in the Parliament on board to say this trade deal is not good. This trade deal will favour big business over countries, over people. Whilst our Green MEPs were doing that, the secret talks were happening in Brussels. There were, I'm sorry Catherine, she is my neighbour by the way, there were Liberal Democrats in those secret talks. Green MEPs and their staff were outside getting arrested because they were so angry at what was being proposed whilst working within the Parliament. That's where we're different. We will absolutely take to the streets if we have to raise awareness of the things that are wrong. And finally, that big unique selling point, we always stand on a common manifesto with Greens across the EU. Thank you.
Just to help my colleague out here, the leading candidate on the ChangeUK list is currently an MEP. I think he's a good guy, by the way. We're on the same committee. He sits as a member of the European People's Party, which is the centre-right Christian Democrat, sort of Angela Merkel kind of group. And he used to be a Conservative. So it's an improvement. The situation with unique selling points, right. Well, first of all, I set out our manifesto, which derives from the Party European Socialist Manifesto, which is a common manifesto across the European Union, in my opening presentation. But just to give you some practicalities on that, on tax justice, my predecessor, Elise Dodds, was the lead, they call them rapporteurs in the European Parliament, I'm sure you all know that, on a series of reports on tax justice and tax evasion, which are leading to practical steps being put in place. In the European Union Budget Committee, the European Union sets a 7-year budget cycle. The next one will come into force from 2021 to 2027. That, by the way, is why the transition period that Theresa May used to talk about a lot came to a close at the end of 2020. It's the end of the 7-year budget. In the new 7-year budget, the threshold for climate spend is considerably higher. It's considerably higher because the Socialists and Democrats pushed for that, and because I pushed for it within the UK Labour delegation, which went to the S&D, but also, I think quite importantly, there is a fund for a thing called Just Transition. If I had to explain to you what unjust transition was, it was the way we closed down the mining industry in this country. Just transition is about putting in the transition funding to those communities who are in carbon-based jobs to ensure that they can move to the new economy. And I'm very proud that we've been able to establish that for the first time. They are the practical representations of actually doing something about those unique selling points that I talked about earlier on. Forgive me, did you want me to address that point about the Labour Party at this stage, which was specifically, why should anybody vote Labour?
Why should Remain voters?
Why should Remain voters? In this region, quite simply, because if you vote Labour in this region, you get me, and you get a strong voice within the Labour Party for that Remain process. And without those, and as I've already said, without those strong voices for Remain within the Labour Party, you will not stop Brexit. Because it cannot be done, as I will repeat and repeat and repeat, on the basis of votes for minority parties. And if you think sending a message is going to mean anything to this Conservative government, I would strongly suggest that you might want to think seriously. You might want to think seriously about that. Have you been drinking a lot? There's a bar, if you want to go and have a drink and shout at people. So that's what I suggest that's what I suggest you do in this region. If you want to vote Labour, and if you're a supporter of the Labour Party, which quite clearly a lot of you aren't, I'm not bothered about what you want to vote in this election, vote for the party you want to vote for. If you're a Labour supporter, vote for the Labour Party, because you'll be backing the core values that I talked about earlier, and you'll be backing somebody who wants to see a settlement that actually gets us to a point where we've got a consensus to go back to the people, because there is no good Brexit.
I think I was wanting to press you, John, on what you thought the best final outcome of the whole shebang would be, but I think you've just answered.
I think I've made that perfectly clear in the 4 answers I've given.
That outcome would be Remain.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I suggest, by the way, if any of you have got any doubts about what I think about this, go to my website, which is heavily oversubscribed at the moment, but I think we've got it back up online because it's getting so many hits, and read what I've written over the past 3 years. You won't even find the term when Britain leaves the European Union, because whenever my staff drafted that, it got sent back saying, must try harder. The term is if Britain leaves the European Union.
Okay.
Let's just read the leader.
Well, we have a healthy disrespect for leaders in the Labour Party. Even Tony Blair, in his pomp, when he was leader of the Labour Party, the most successful leader we ever had, lost things in the Labour Party and couldn't move forward with things in the Labour Party. I keep coming back to the point. 203 Labour MPs voted for a public vote. Unless you bring more of them across, which doesn't mean yelling at them, it means winning the argument and their hearts and minds to this, you will not stop Brexit. It's quite simple. They are the maths in the House of Commons. Sorry?
It means making them think they might lose their seats.
Well, it also means making them think they might not lose their seats because Leave voters will vote to throw them out. That's the contra-argument. So you've got to bring people with you to ensure that people come along to that view. And that a second vote is not seen as an insult to people, but it's seen as actually implementing accountability, which is why every time somebody stands up and says bollocks to Brexit and calls Leave voters stupid, you make it harder to win the battle. So think about that.
Thank you. We've got 2 more questions, and I want, although they're quite difficult ones, I want them answered really fast. Sorry about that. Stuart Ward.
I think we all agree that free speech is fundamental to a tolerant society. And then my question is, how do you justify the imposition of upload filters with no legal redress, operated by companies? I'm referring to the recent EU copyright directive. I believe the only MEP on this panel that voted in favour of that was Mr. John Howarth.
Yeah, absolutely.
The real concern here I have is that lobbyists are convincing MEPs to vote for things that seriously harm our society, and purely to, we're talking about the media companies who have fought every technological innovation from printed song sheets to the cassette tapes, and now they're going to try and destroy the internet. And this is not just a side thing. The internet now is our global communication system, and it will be more and more prevalent in the future. To have upload filters imposed on us in this is going to be very serious.
Well, I was very proud of the role I played on the copyright directive, because I'll tell you why. Because people who work in the creative industries get their work ripped off. Because the people who benefit from the situation that allows all of the power to be wielded by the platforms, that's Facebook, Google, YouTube, etc., means that people who write songs, who deploy them, people who write articles for newspapers and deploy them, simply don't get paid. They simply don't get paid. And this is the reality of this creative economy, is that the people who make mega bucks are Google and Facebook, and the people who don't get paid are the musicians and the artists and the creators, which is why every serious organisation which represented a creative profession backed the copyright directive, not because it was perfect, but because it was a step forward. And I am part of a party that represents, or at least it tries to represent, organisations which represent working people. And I'm a member of the National Union of Journalists. And my trade union, the National Union of Journalists, backed the copyright directive. And I ran a creative business for 20 odd years in this town, having my work ripped off on the internet. Now, I find it absolutely no problem to do that, because if I've got to choose between the power in society, between the company that makes gazillions and the people who are making pennies, I'm going to back the people who are making pennies. And when we come to talk about freedom of speech and upload filters, the Christchurch killings streamed live on YouTube and so on. Not many people had a lot to say about that when they were talking about the copyright directive. So freedom of speech in an entirely libertarian USA type sense, I don't think is necessarily the ideal that I want to support in a democratic society. I don't think the copyright directive is perfect. And it probably wouldn't have got through the Parliament if I hadn't kept the British Labour group and therefore a considerable force in the Social Democrat group committed to it. So I'm proud of the role I played, because hopefully some people will actually benefit from it in their daily lives.
Elise.
And on the other side, Greens voted against this en masse because it restricts small creatives and favours the big multinationals. No. It does. No. It does. I'm sorry, it does.
How much did Google spend lobbying?
Can I finish, please? Thank you. Greens were actually handed a petition with over 5 million signatures on it to hand into the Parliament because people felt so angry. It's bad for artists, for authors, for small publishers and for internet users. And it's not that we don't support some sort of remuneration for creators, of course we do, but the problem with this is that it's reliant on algorithms that can't distinguish between actual copyright infringements and the legal reuse of contents for parody, for example. It's a classic piece of overworked legislation that isn't rooted in reality, and that's absolutely why Greens are against it. And I should make it absolutely clear that we did engage fully, of course, in the process and tried to make sure that the legislation, as we always do, was better. And we will try again, and we will keep on trying until we get the kind of regulations that actually favour ordinary people. Thank you.
Catherine.
Well, I think you've got a very good example here. I know it's always frustrating in election times because we'll come up here and we'll say, I'm better than he is and she's better than, and it's difficult when you come to a meeting like this. But it does really show how difficult and nuanced the work of an MEP is. The Copyright Directive, I expect a lot of you are still sort of scratching your head and saying, what is the Copyright Directive? We have the internet, which is an amazing tool. Not only do we have the internet, which allows us to share and to connect with people around the world, we also have these amazing pieces of kit that we stick in our pockets. So we have this freedom of information and connectivity on one hand. On the other side, we have people who are creating videos and news articles and all sorts of creative industries on the other hand. And there's no regulation. And so it's a free-for-all. So the Commission came up with a proposal to somehow bring the two sides back together. And that first one was sent back to the Commission. It said, no, the Parliament doesn't like it, it's not good enough. The next set of proposals came forward and there was a huge amount of cross-party working. We are a grown-up Parliament. We are quite happy to work across party to get to some consensus so we could come to some middle ground. And that is why I voted against, or I abstained actually, because I said I can't support this, and there were some good elements that I didn't want to lose. And I abstained on that report, but it passed in the Parliament. It now goes to the Council where all the ministers from the 28 countries sit, and I suspect it will be stuck there for a long, long time because it is hugely complicated. You're bringing two ends of the extremes, trying to bring them together. But it does highlight the cross-party negotiations and how we work much more grown up in the European Parliament than shouting at each other as they do in Westminster. I personally set up the MEPs for Wildlife Group, where we had MEPs from every party that put pressure on the Commission to come forward with an action plan on wildlife trafficking. And it even got more money into Europol. I also set up the pro-European cross-party group of British MEPs, and we've met every month since during the referendum and since, looking at ways that we can tackle Brexit cross-party, and that's been really constructive. Also, we work cross-party on the Citizens' Initiative. So it's never very easy to say it's black and it's white, and that is why I think you need grown-ups, politicians that can work together cross-party on these very, very difficult issues, as well as the very big issues that we know is black and it's white, and I'm a Liberal. I will vote that way to defend the protection of individuals, and maybe the Socialists will go with a different way to vote on organising society. But it is that the upload files and the nuances in that package were so complicated. I hope that we come up with something better that protects those individuals, but also fights against the very big Googles of this planet.
Yes, very quickly. I can be very quick because I can't claim to be any kind of expert on the Copyright Directive, except to say, for one thing, it shows the importance of having a European Parliament and of having European institutions to look at these questions which go way beyond our borders but which affect all of us. And also the complexity of some of these issues in balancing the different interests freedom, if you want to call it that, but also there's a commercial aspect to that, as John so clearly explained, and the rights of those who have created the material in the first place. And we shouldn't forget that, of course, the UK is the home to many of those creators. So I think it is a complex issue. As I understand it, also the Copyright Directive, it doesn't apply to smaller platforms, so that's going to open up the possibilities for lots of other producers. So it isn't quite such a closed shop as might be presented. I'm finding myself agreeing with John on some of these issues. I didn't expect that to happen.
Thank you. Pacelli.
Thank you. I will be honest about this issue. I haven't had enough time to actually to look deeply into the Copyright Directive. I've only had a look this afternoon. So what I could see is that there are different competing interests. We need to find to strike the right balance between consumers who have the right to look into, have to access to those informations. We have also to protect the creative industry, which actually is huge in the UK, especially given that English is actually the language which, being in music or in writing, is mainly seen on the internet. So actually the UK citizens will be the ones who will be affected by this directive, or who will benefit from it. And then there are the corporate companies who have another interest. So my take on this is that it is a directive. Anyway, it wouldn't be binding strictly on the state, on the UK. We would have to implement our own provisions, which should normally be aligned to the directive. So we are still within these sorts of scheme. I guess there are still room to influence and to impact on the directive, and then even within the UK we could actually change some of these provisions to strike a balance which would benefit all the majority, the consumers and the small and medium industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To my great regret, I fear we have no time for the final question, which I'd hoped to put to the panel. It remains for me, therefore, to thank all the members of the panel very much indeed for coming this evening. For a debate both courteous and vigorous. And may I hand over briefly to Nigel Spears, who I think is going to wind up, and then to Peter Lejupe.
Right, well, I cannot beat what's been said, and I have no wish to cover the ground again. My name is Nigel. I happen to live in Maidenhead. The only reason I'm standing here, or at least as far as I can see, is you did not come to listen to me. That's very simple. The only claim I have to be here just now is that I spent far too much of my time acting to do some of the things that the panel have said, whether it's revoke Article 50 or a people's vote. I'm not going to talk about that just now. But here's something I would like to leave you with. I know an awful lot of people in this room. A lot of them are, and I read this quote earlier, they're legends to me, but here's what also came to me. None of them were born that way. None of you legends were born legends. You have made yourselves that. And I am hugely grateful for that. But here's the question I want to leave you with, and it's just for my thoughts. The people I know who campaign, and have campaigned for this for a long time, have brought normally one of three things to that action. They've brought time, or money, or skills. Now, I'm very conscious that there's an audience and a panel. But you've come from far away to listen to this, and you're going back to your constituencies, to your people. Please consider if you're offering all that you can in each of those three categories: time and money and skills. There are groups here, Berkshire for Europe, Maiden of Europe, Slough, Woking, and there's all sorts of groups here that I'm aware of tonight. Contact them before you go, because we can do so much more together. Thank you.
Peter Leisure.
Hello folks, I'm the chair of Berkshire for Europe. I just want to say thank you very much to Monica who organised this. She did this in a month flat. This normally takes 2 to 3 months to organise, to get all the speakers together, get everything organised, find the hall and get everything sorted out. It's her great ability and her team as well for doing this as well. And also you probably noticed I'm Scottish as well. We hired this place on commercial rates, so we're having buckets out there to collect money. So if you please put some money you can afford, some change or whatever, I'll be more than grateful, because this is quite expensive place to rent, and also I'll pay for all these leaflets we've published and printed and distributed all over Berkshire. No, it is not cheap to do these things, and we actually are based on your kindness and the finance we get from you people as well. And I would also say as well that Berkshire for Europe is a hard Remain organisation. Some of you may not think that, but we're actually very much a hard Remain organisation. We do not accept Brexit. We'll always fight Brexit, and if we have to leave, we'll be fighting to get back into the EU as quickly as possible.
Hello, my name is Phil Jones. Now, how many of you have heard of Natura 2000? Please put your hand up in the air if you've heard of the wildlife programme of the European Union, Natura 2000. Did you know that tomorrow is Natura 2000 Day? So please think of the Birds Directive, of the Habitats Directive, of migratory species tomorrow, and thank you for that.
And one thing else I will say, remember 6.1 million people voted to revoke Article 50. They are there to be taken. If we can get these people to vote for Remain, we beat Farage. Just the sheer numbers. And that's the most important thing. And there was an article in I think it was a Guardian today, saying that if you look at percentages, we're not that far away from sort of Farage's group. If you add all these percentages up there, it may not be the party we want. It may be just the percentages that give us the actual sort of like force for good in this country. And that's the most important thing. So go out and vote for a person you think fit. And these guys here, I do thank them as well. They've actually nice to have a good debate as well. They actually stood here, and even the Labour chap here, I reckon you did well, mate. It wasn't hard for you, but you did well. So I'll give you that. And thank you very much. You've been excellent actually. You've been very good, and it's nice to have a proper debate. I will say actually that of all the 4 meetings we've had, this has been the best one we've had.
Thanks again
and cough up please as well, I'm Scottish.
Thanks again to Monica and to Peter, our brilliant chairman, without whom this thing could never have happened.